Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Bound by Grace podcast, where we explore the beauty, complexity, and redemptive power of relationships through the lens of faith. Today's episode is one that speaks to the heart of many, whether you've walked through it yourself, supported someone who has, or simply want to understand it better. We're diving into the challenges of divorce. Not just the legal or logistical hurdles, but the emotional, spiritual, and relational weight it carries. Joining me is someone whose voice brings both clarity and compassion to difficult conversations, Pastor Jonathan Smith. He is the host of the podcast Just the Bible Will Do. With years of pastoral experience and a deep love for scripture, Pastor Jonathan offers a grounded, grace-filled perspective on how believers can navigate the pain of divorce while holding fast to truth and hope. Whether you're in the midst of this journey or walking alongside someone who is, this conversation is absolutely for you. So let's lean in with open hearts and a desire to see God's grace meet us, even in the hardest places. Thank you so much for joining me today. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing well, Amber. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast today. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So I wanted to give you the floor and let people know a little bit about you and your background.
Okay, so yes, I am Pastor Jonathan Smith. I have been pastoring Community Baptist Church in Mooresville, North Carolina for over 8 years now, going on my ninth year. And I grew up in a pastor's home, and pastoring was something that I said I would never do. And here
Mhm.
I am here I am doing it. But so I've been pastoring for 8 years. I've had my podcast since 2020. And we're getting ready to break 200 episodes, getting ready to break 1,500 downloads. Things are good on that aspect of it. Uh, I've got a, I've got four kids. I have two stepdaughters. I have a 14-year-old stepdaughter, a 9-year-old stepdaughter. I have a, son that is 5 years old, and I also have a baby on the way. So very grateful for what
Oh,
God's doing in my life.
very good. So what do you talk about on Just the Bible Will Do?
So just the Bible will do podcast has a couple of things that we discuss. Mainly what we do, what main two of my episodes, I put out 3 episodes a week, sometimes more, but two of my episodes a week are the sermons that I preach on Sundays and I teach Bible study on Wednesday night. So I upload those. I also have a segment called Jump In with Jonathan that releases on that podcast as well. And in that segment, we discuss a variety of issues, topics. I bring on different guests. Some may be religious, they may not be. It's sort of what I call a hodgepodge session. And we
Yeah.
talk about pretty much anything in that session of the podcast. But the whole purpose of Just the Bible Will Do podcast was a place that the newest of believers or the oldest of believers could come and hear the word of God clearly taught or preached. And it's not my opinion, it's not the opinion of somebody else, it's actually the Bible
Yes.
or what the Bible says. Because unfortunately, I grew up in an era of legalistic preaching and teachings,
Mhm.
and I've seen a lot of people get hurt and burn out, trying to live by man's rules, man's ways. And when you study the Bible, there's a lot of things that we were taught in those legalistic eras that was not in the Bible. And in a lot of my podcasts that I do on there, I break down those things. I break down those barriers, denominational barriers, and things like that. Yes, I pastor a Baptist church, and I'm very proud to pastor a Baptist church. But at the end of the day, I think you would say that I should be a non-denominational preacher, because I don't believe heaven's just going to be full of Baptists. I believe it's going to have a little bit of everybody there.
I
And
agree.
unfortunately, we've used denominations to draw boundaries of I can't
Mhm.
associate with this person or that person. When you listen to the podcast, you'll find out real quick that denomination has no boundaries, with Just the Bible Will Do podcast.
I love that. I love hearing you say that. On every single, it seems like this is brought up in every single one of the episodes I've done so far. where I have to say I'm not religious, I'm relational with God. And I think that that's a big deal that people need to recognize. So I love that you said that. That's awesome. I am interested to know, since you are a faith-based podcast, and you said that you have people that come on that aren't necessarily religious. How does that dynamic work on your podcast?
So I set expectations in the beginning, before we go live on the podcast. Like, I will ask that there not be any profanity. Be you, but I try to keep it family friendly. I try to keep it where everybody can listen to it, of course. So what I will do is I turn it over to them and they have the floor. And once I open up the podcast, I turn it over to my guests. I let them have the floor and I follow the path that they go down. And at times I will try to circle back and bring some sort of religious point to it. Or they may say, I'm not, or they may say in the offset, I'm not a religious person, or
Mhm.
I don't go to church. So that opens the door for me to ask this question: why? 9 times out of 10, when you hear that answer, it's because of something man did, not what God has done to them.
I completely agree. And that's hard to separate, right? Because
Yes.
you see these people who claim that they're godly, that they follow Christ, and when they act this way towards you or act this way and you see it, if it's not towards you, you think to yourself, if that's what God's about, you know what I mean? Like that's going to be really difficult for me. And I had an issue where I was going to church. I was seeing a lot of people that had just a fake mask on at church, and then I knew how they lived their life or how they treated other people, and I was like, that can't be right. You know what I mean? So it made it difficult to wanna go to church. I still had a relationship with God, but it made it difficult to want to go to church.
Right. So one of the things that I've told my people at church, one of the best verses of scripture that's ever spoke out to me is Romans chapter number 14, verse number 12. And every man shall give an account of himself to God. I said, if you walk into a restaurant and you see a beer sitting on another church member's table, that's between them and God. If you walk into
Mhm.
a restaurant and you hear profanity out of another church member, that's between them and God. At the end of the day, if they're in leadership and they're having a beer or whatever, I'm not gonna say much. Now, if they get drunk and start a fight or something, then that's a different story. But one thing that I told my church members is be real, be you. Don't try to
Yeah.
hide it from me. Don't try to hide it from other people in the church. Be who you are. And because of that, I've started seeing people come to church that we would have never gotten in church because they were like what you was talking about. They was seeing certain people here, certain people there, and when these people came to church, they wasn't who they were out in the world. And at the end of the day, when we realize we have to give an account to God just for me, I don't have to give an account to God for you, then that changes the whole dynamic of Christianity. And that's one of the biggest things that I have done my best to teach everybody and disciple. When I disciple new Christians, I tell them, I say, hey, look, I'm going to screw up. There's going to be places that other people screw up. And when they do, don't judge them for it. Love them through it. Because when
Yeah.
you mess up, I'm going to love you through it and I'm going to help you through it. Because at the end of the day, you have to give an account to God for what you do, and I have to give an account to God for what I do. But if anybody wants to listen to the podcast, they can find it at justthebiblewilldo.com. I'm on every platform possible right now as well. So,
Very good. And if somebody wants to reach out and they can't remember exactly what it was that he said to reach out for, you can go to boundbygracepodcast.com, and he is in guest spotlight and his link is in there. So you can always reach out that way too. Good. So let's jump into the conversation of the challenges of divorce. So I have questions for you. And like I said before, we're just going to dive into the questions. But if the Spirit leads us in a different direction and wants us to elaborate more, we will do so. So, looking back, what do you now understand about your first marriage that you couldn't see while in it?
I've seen this question and I put a lot of thought into it. Um, to be honest, I married the wrong person. Um, the person that married said they were a Christian, but
Hmm.
their life proved otherwise. Um, they were not supportive of the ministry. They
Hmm.
were not supportive, like anything that had to do with church. I did it by myself, practically. Um, and I should have recognized that, but you're blinded. It's like what somebody said one time: marriage is like a midnight phone call. You get the ring and then you wake up. Uh, I was blinded by certain things, and during the first process of the marriage, everything was good for like the first 3 years, and after about year three, year four, year five was tough. Um, Year six, they came to me and said, "Hey, I want to leave,"
Mm.
and I fought like heck to keep them from leaving. Um, and I feel like that by fighting to keep them from leaving, I did nothing but made the situation that much worse.
Yes.
Um, and that can go into the church world as well. There's going to be people in the church world that says, "Hey, I want to leave your church," and we try to keep them, and it makes the situation worse.
Yeah.
Um, she came to me and said, "I want to leave," and I said, "No, don't leave. I'll dedicate more time to you. I will get a job working from home and all these different things." So I made all of these changes to my life, but no changes were made to her life.
Hmm.
Um, so looking back into the marriage, something that I should have seen, something one of my friends told me that I ignored was, and I don't want to talk very bad about this person because they may see this, but it's true. They were very selfish. In a marriage, we cannot have selfish people. I have to give 100%. My spouse has to give 100%. Marriage is not about me. It's not about you. It's about us. And when we lose the sight of that, we've lost the sight of our marriage. And the entire marriage was not about us. It was about one particular party. Um, so if any advice to a new couple getting ready to get married, make sure that it's all about you guys in general and as a partnership, and not you're not a sole proprietor in marriage. It is 100% partnership.
It absolutely is. I agree. The 50-50 rule that everyone says, oh, marriage is 50-50. I do not see that and have not seen that in others. What I would say is there's 100%. And during the day, depending on what's taken your energy, kids, work, whatever it is, you deplete your 100%.
Hmm.
And your goal is to look at one another at the end of the day when you have to have 100% together and see who's more depleted and make up for that depletion. So one day my husband might give 80 and I've got 20. One day
Right.
I might give 90 and he's got 10. But at the end of the day, when it all comes out in the wash, it all ends up being 50-50 because you're taking those days as they come and you're helping your spouse. You look at them, you love them in action.
Yes, most definitely. And I agree with that 100%. And that's the way that it should be. And unfortunately, we're taught, even in church, that marriage is 50-50. And it's
Mhm.
time that we change that.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that's just, it's not reality.
Yes.
Um, cool. So, were there patterns emotional, spiritual, or relational that contributed to the breakdown of that relationship?
Yes and no. Um, After year 6, after they said that they wanted to end things and we fought through and kept things, um, sh sh the other party went through deep depression and
Mm,
was also I'm trying to be very careful in what I say, went through deep depression, um, diagnosed with being bipolar. So yes, there were emotional breakdowns there. Um, but I think part of spiritual breakdown is yes, I will take ownership for this. I wasn't as strong as a Christian as I should have been at times. Um, they wanted to drink and party and go places that Christians shouldn't be going. And I didn't hold my ground because I didn't want to lose them. So
mhm,
I allowed certain things to contribute into not being the spiritual leader that I needed to be. Um, and that's hard to say, but it's very true.
mhm.
Um, if I had some choices to remake, if I could go back to year 6 when they said they wanted to leave, I would honestly, looking back today, I would have let them go. It would have saved me a lot of heartache from where I'm at today. But also, I wouldn't trade for saying no and for fighting because I wouldn't have learned some of the things that I've learned. And I wouldn't be the husband that I am today because I wouldn't have learned from the past. So I'm grateful that I didn't say no. As far as relational breakdowns, yes, there were. Um, I put a lot of my work first
Mm,
instead of my family. Flip side of the coin, I was the only one working at the time. So it's hard,
yeah,
that's a hard balance anyway. Um, so I would say that was part of the relational breakdown that I seen on our side. That answers all 3 of your questions.
you're doing good staying on the point. We usually aren't that good. Um, awesome. So, how did your identity shift after the divorce, and what was the hardest part of rediscovering yourself?
That was a that now that's a whole different topic trying to keep on point. So I may drift off here. Um, Looking back at finding myself after the divorce, my self-esteem was very low after the divorce. I felt like a failure, and I believe everybody does. I felt like um, I was as low as I could go. You ought to try to pastor and go through something like this. It's extremely difficult because a lot of people don't understand this, but as a pastor, when we go to church, it doesn't matter if we're sick, it doesn't matter if we're well, it doesn't matter if we're depressed, it doesn't matter if we're discouraged. We're going to put a smile on our face, and there's nothing wrong with us. Um, so learning to hide the pain that I was going through was tough from the pulpit
Mm,
perspective. Rediscovering myself was tough because there were nights that I didn't sleep before we separated because they said if you go to sleep, I'll take you out. I'm trying to be careful with my words because I don't want this stream to get taken down. I'll take you out. There were times that they threatened to take their own life in the middle of the night. Um, and so there were times that they looked at me and said they hated me. They wished that I was dead. They wished that when I was at work, something would happen to me and it would take me out. So I heard all of these different things.
mm,
Um, and on top of all of that, I was cheated on. And so
mm,
that made my self-esteem go, and not just once, but multiple times. So that took down the self-esteem that much lower. On and so during that time of the divorce, I felt all of these different emotions. I felt betrayal. I felt hurt. I felt angry at
Did
times.
you did you feel inadequate after the cheating? Did that make you feel like did you have any guilt on yourself?
I didn't have guilt on myself, but I also felt it kicked my self-esteem very, very low.
Yeah.
Um, I understand that once someone cheats, that the trust will never be back in the relationship ever again because you'll always question in your mind is when they're out late, supposed to be with friends, are they cheating? When they don't answer their phone call, you're going to say, okay, are they on the phone with someone else? Um,
So I see where you're coming from, but I think with God, if your relationship, if someone has chosen after cheating, um, after being cheated on, that
mhm,
they're going to still try and make this work,
mhm,
they're with counseling, with prayer and giving that to God and constant forgiveness and trying to forget. Yes, that person that cheated is going to have to make some changes and be very open and honest with that person for probably a few years until that person calms themselves down and that thought of them, is someone else on the phone? Are they good? Those slowly do go away
mhm,
with changes in the cheater. Changes
mhm,
like you can look in my phone. I will not say anything.
mhm,
Ask me where I am. I'm telling you exactly. Maybe don't even wait for the person to ask. I'm here. I'm
mhm.
speaking with this person. Those changes have to happen and it makes it where you feel, man, they're right on top of me, but you kind of did it to yourself.
Right.
Like they need that.
Yes, there was never an apology for stepping outside the bounds. There was never, once I caught them, once I knew for a fact who it was, there was
Mm,
never, "Hey, I'm sorry, I messed up." There was never none of that. It was, "Oh, well, it is what it is. You can't change it now." That was the answer that I got. So, I looking back at that point, I knew that we were at a place that couldn't be reconciled.
yeah.
Um, so rediscovering myself during this time, I felt all of these different things. On top of all these different things, as a pastor, I had other preachers calling me saying, "Hey, I hear you're going through a divorce. When are you turning in your resignation to your church? When are you handing over your ordination certificate? When are you stepping out of the ministry? Let me know when you're stepping out of the ministry so that I can send some of my preacher boys to your church to fill in for your church."
That's
Um,
crazy.
this is like on week 1, and I stepped back and I said, "I'm not." "Well, you know you're outside of the will of God because Paul said
As
that
you
you're to be
shouldn't.
the."
No.
Yeah,
Period. Point blank. It says if they have cheated on you, you have the authority to leave.
that
Period.
is correct. Correct. And they go over to First Timothy or Second Timothy chapter number 3, where Paul tells young Timothy that we're to be the husband of one wife. Unfortunately, they consider that one wife for a lifetime. They don't care about cheating. They don't care about any of that. And so what I did, I asked a magic question. What do you do about when God divorced Israel?
Mhm.
And they're like, "Oh, they reconciled." Yeah, but they're not fully reconciled yet. They're still blinded. So when you look at I had all of these things. And when I was going through all of this, I reached out to one of my mentors and I said, "Hey, listen, I'm struggling. Like I'm on the verge of turning in my resignation at church. I'm on the verge of just walking away from all of this." And he said, "Jonathan, I have a few questions for you." He said, "First of all, do you believe that before the foundation of the world that God knew that you'd be a pastor?" I said, "Absolutely." He said, Do you believe that before the foundation of the world that God knew you go through a divorce?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "So if you quit pastoring and if you quit preaching because you went through this divorce, then you're calling God a liar. Either God called you to preach or he didn't call you to preach."
Oh, I
And man,
like
that
that.
was
He
oh, I
either
did
called
too.
you or he didn't. Yeah.
And he said, if you can walk away and quit now, then do it because you're not real. You're not who God said, you're not who you said you are. And man, that changed everything. That changed the whole outcome and the whole dynamic of who I was at that moment. That brought me back up to a level playing field. And I was like, you know what? God's got me. One of the biggest things, my dad totally disagrees with me staying in the ministry to this day. Um, but here's
That's
one thing that
because it's old school thought process.
it is. But here's something my dad told me. He said, Jonathan, I'm not your pastor. I'm your father. And I don't care who talks bad about you. I don't care what they do. I will defend you. And,
Mm.
you expect to hear that from your parents, but I've heard other people say that, and this was the lack of trust. I've heard other people tell me that, and I learned that they didn't do that. And I'll never forget one pastor called my dad, and my dad told him, said, listen, leave my son alone. He's got enough on his plate. He doesn't need you criticizing him. And knowing that my dad had my back, even though he still disagrees with me pastoring, um, he calls me every Sunday, tells me he's praying for the service and praying that God will use us in a mighty way. But I had to rediscover myself as a person. I had to rediscover myself as a pastor because there were things that I didn't understand when other people went through divorce as a pastor that I understood then. There were some people I had to go back to and say, hey, look, I'm sorry. I should have been a little bit more empathetic about this than I was. I had to rediscover myself as a parent because now I'm not parenting a child that lives in my house. I'm trying to co-parent a child that lives 5 hours away from me.
Hmm.
And that's been tough. Um, and then I had to rediscover myself as a partner. When I finally felt like it was the right time to step back out on the dating scene, I said, you know what? There's a couple mistakes that I'm not going to make again. And I've been very straight and upfront with my wife. I said, if you cheat on me, it's over. I'm not dealing with this again. If you ever come to me and says I want to leave, I said I will oblige you. I'm not going to try to keep you because at that point it lets me know that your love has ended for me. And a lot of people say, well, that's wrong. That's cold. No, these are things that I learned from the first time. These are things that I should have recognized that it took a lot of pain, a lot of suffering, a lot of mental torment to
Hmm.
come to this realization in my life. And through that, I've become a better pastor. I've become a more empathy is not the right word, sympathetic pastor. I'm not
Hmm.
as hard on some things that I used to be, um, because I understand that everybody deserves a second chance. And had
Hmm.
God not given me a second chance at ministry, had I not had a mentor that said, "Hey, look, God called you or God didn't," then I wouldn't be in the ministry today. If my mentor would have said, "You know what? I agree. You need to step out." I'd have went to church that following honestly, I'd have went to church that following Sunday and I'd have said, "Here's my resignation. I'm done." It would have been a lot easier as a Christian to do that because I could have went and sat on a pew and concealed everything that was going on in my life. Nobody really, I could have went to another church, another area. Nobody knew nothing. I could have started over, but I chose not to do that. Um, I would encourage anybody that's going through divorce, don't take the path with the least amount of friction. Go down the hardest path that you can. You will become a better person.
Oh, I like that too. So I'm interested to know a little bit more about your walk being a pastor during this time. You said that it was difficult because you still had to go to church and put a smile on your face and push through. Was there ever a time where you were real with your congregation that you were struggling and you were going through this?
About 2 weeks after everything
Okay.
had taken place, I'd met with my deacon board 6 months before all of this took place. And I said, look, if
Mm.
some things at home don't change, I'm going to go down this path. I need to know if you guys are with me or if you guys are against me. I said, because if you're going to be
Mhm.
against me, I'm telling you, it more than likely is going to happen. So, like, I gave fair warning to the leadership of the church. When I went to the church the first week and announced what was going to take place, I just said, "Look, me and my wife are splitting. We have unreconcilable differences, and I feel like that's best where I leave it right now. I won't answer any question. I will answer any questions when it comes to me." I said, "But I can tell you right now that I've not stepped outside. I've not stepped outside the bounds of marriage. I've not cheated. I've not done any of that. So
Mhm.
anything else beyond that, if there's questions about that, I'll answer it or I may not answer it." Um, so I left it at that, like, week 1. When she left, which was, like, 2 weeks later, she took everything that I had, literally,
Mhm.
left me, like, didn't even leave me a couch to sleep on.
Mm.
So, absolutely everything, and so I had to restart, and when the ladies of the church found out she took everything, the ladies of the church went and had a housewarming party for me, and we had it at the church fellowship hall, and they literally rebought me everything that she took with the exception of furniture. Um, at that moment, I set all of them down. I set all the women down at the church, and that was the real moment. I took them step by step from year 6 to year 12 and told them everything that went on in between, told them how all of this was going on. And some of them said, "I can't believe that. I can't believe that she would do that," and all of this. And I said, "Just watch your Facebook over the next 6 months." And the watching of what I said and what happened on Facebook over the next 6 months solidified that I was in the right, that I had made the right decision. Through that same process, through that same time frame, I eventually went to the church and set the whole church down one Sunday morning and explained from start to finish what all had happened. And it was not an easy thing to do. I had to I had to be very careful in what I said. I had to trust that what I said wasn't going to leave the four walls of the church at that time because there were lawyers involved, there was other things involved at that time, so I had to be very careful that I didn't get a defamation suit put on me. But
Mhm.
after that, it was a little bit easier to go in. People sort of knew that I was struggling, but they didn't know how deep I was struggling after that.
Yeah. Mm. Um, well, let's shift to a little bit more of a positive thing.
All
What
right.
feels different about how you communicate, love, or resolve conflict in your current marriage?
That's fairly easy. Me and my wife today, Brittany, me and her have a very good relationship, a very strong relationship. We have since we met day one. Um, we communicate about everything.
Mhm.
If if she's at work and I'm leaving to go to the store, I'll text her, say, "Hey, I'm going to Walmart or I'm going to
Same.
Lowe's."
Same. We do the same.
Do you
It
need
becomes it becomes second nature. Like, it's not even, "I need to text them." It's, "I'm going to the store." Like, they're my person.
right,
So, that's what we do.
right. We also and now this may sound insecure to some people, it may not, but it is what it is. We all have Life 360 on our phones, so we know where everybody's
I
at.
like it.
There's no
Yeah, I like that.
um, and that wasn't something that I said, "Hey, we've got to do this." It was something that once we got official in dating and all, she said, "Hey, me and my girls have Life 360. You want to be a part of it?" Like, it was an option for me. And I was like, "Heck yeah, I'll be a part of it." Um, so communication is huge. When we disagree on something, we both may walk off in the heat of the moment
Mhm.
just so something's not said that shouldn't be said. But we'll
Mhm.
come back and we'll talk about it, about why we feel this is this way and why this is that way. Um, so we communicate about everything. With the exception if somebody comes to church, and I'll be very clear about this, if somebody at church comes up to me and says, "Hey, I need to talk to you in a confidence about something," I do not re-communicate that to my wife because I made a promise to them that it would
Absolutely.
stay between
Yeah.
me and them. Um, which usually if somebody comes up and talks to me and wants to talk to me in confidence, I take another deacon with me anyway, so that
Mhm.
it's between me, that person, and the deacon. That way nothing can be said Jonathan said or Jonathan didn't say.
I like that.
Um,
Yeah.
yep. So that's how we resolve conflict. We communicate about it. Also, our my love for my wife is different in this marriage than it was in my first marriage. Um, how can I don't know how to say. I want to be very careful when I say I I loved my first wife, but I truly love my current wife. I don't know. It's weird. Um,
No, I
it's
get it completely. Like, I thought I loved my first husband, but the love I have for this one is just beyond what I can communicate. Like, I admire him. I highly respect him. I have this admiration. I want the best for him. He
mhm,
makes me want to be better because I think he deserves the best out of me.
right. And I have a lot more support, and I think this helps too. I have a lot more support with this spouse too. No, and I don't sit down and make comparisons. Please don't think that. Anybody listening,
N
do not compare your first spouse versus your second spouse or whatever. Don't do that. But my wife supports me every Sunday, every Wednesday, every day of the week at work. Um, my podcasting. I mean, because I do podcasts late at night. I'll send you a calendar invite, and if we do an interview, it'll be early for you, but dang, it'll be late for me. She
That'd be
supports all
fine.
of that.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, it's great to know she's in my corner, and I'm in her corner. My wife just graduated nursing school back in January.
Oh,
Um,
fantastic.
yes, so graduated with the BSN RN. So I'm very blessed in that part, but learning how to having somebody in my corner to support
Yeah.
me and I support them. The love
Yes.
runs twice as deep
Yes.
um as before. Having someone that truly understands me as a person, um, which can be difficult.
Mhm.
Um, is great as well. We have a lot of the same dreams, the same desires. We have a good work ethic, both of us. I mean, we both work hard, um, and always looking to be that much more prosperous, whether it be in the ministry, whether it be in podcasting, whether it be in other businesses, whatever.
Mhm.
Um, and to me that means a lot.
Yeah.
Knowing that if I'm having a bad day or whatever, I can actually pick up the phone and call her, and she actually cares.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's fantastic. I'm so glad you have that now. Um, support from your spouse is high on the list of things that's important in a marriage.
Absolutely.
Um, it makes you feel like you can do more.
Mhm,
You can do that because they have your back.
mhm.
So it makes you into a better, more confident, more secure individual, which makes you stronger as a couple.
Absolutely. It empowers you, not only as
It
a
does.
person, but as a couple. It makes you feel unstoppable is the right
Mhm.
word.
Yeah.
So, I'm very grateful for that. So that's what's different in every aspect of our marriage. If I had to draw a comparison, like I said, don't ever do that, but if you draw a comparison, everything is a 180-degree difference than what it was in the past.
Sometimes it is okay to draw a comparison, and this is why I state that, not in an unhealthy manner, but
Right.
as a way of almost like especially when you first meet the person that you're thinking about possibly marrying as your second spouse, drawing the comparison so that way you can see, am I making the same, not mistake, but the same decision? Like, is this kind of the same person? Do they have
Mhm.
similar qualities? You need to evaluate that, because if your previous relationship or marriage had any toxicity in it,
Mhm.
you are more likely to have a second one that's toxic if you
Mhm.
don't do the comparison and evaluation in a realistic and logical manner, because we always go toward things that are familiar.
Exactly. You are exactly right. And one thing that I did was, if something, as part of communication, and this was something that both of us have done, is that if something in my previous marriage was said or done, and I didn't talk about a lot of that. I mean, I was open with whatever, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
If my current spouse said something that triggered me from my previous marriage, I
Yep.
communicated that,
Good.
and she did the same thing. So that's the type of communication that we have on that level as well.
I love that. So you were able to recognize that trigger and communicated, hey, this actually is something that triggers me because this was what I experienced before. Instead of reacting with emotion, you were able to communicate and realize that trigger wasn't because she did something wrong. It was because of a past trauma.
Correct. And if something triggered me like that, I may would walk away for a second, or I'd say, "Give me a minute," and then I
Mhm.
would say, "Listen, that can't be said or that can't be done because in my past, X, 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 X." And then the same way with her, if I said something or did something, then she would say, "Give me a minute," or, you know, and then we would talk about the trigger on either side, and overcoming that trigger, um, explaining what we meant when something was said that triggered us from the past. Way I
Mhm.
said it or the way I did it may not have been how her ex said it or did it. And that helped out a lot too. But once we're in year going on 3 or 4, I have my mind, all my time run
Get it
together.
together. She's going to hear this and she's going to be like, "You don't know how long it's been?"
Year 3, now that we have a better understanding, those triggers have left on, I believe, on both sides. We both
Good.
have gotten past those and moved on.
I've got to give you props because not a lot of people are emotionally intelligent enough, especially both partners having that level where they recognize triggers and they want to communicate instead of react. They
Mhm,
want to work through it instead of react
mhm,
and play victim. And
mhm,
I I hope all the listeners are really honing in on this particular moment in our podcast and realizing if you're not doing that in your marriage or relationship, this is something that will be a game changer.
mhm,
Not to mention the intimacy that you will create from sharing that vulnerability with your spouse.
mhm. And don't ever play victim. Defend
Don't play
yourself.
victim. Yeah. Yeah.
Defend yourself. There's only one type of people that play victim, and they are narcissistic people, and they'll always play victim. They'll never
Mhm.
defend themselves. They'll never defend their stance. They'll always say, "Oh, the reason you said this is because you don't love me. You don't care for me. You don't this. You don't do that." And I
It's
will
a
go out.
form of manipulation.
Exactly. And I will say this very clear, and this may take us off topic for just a second.
That's
Don't
okay.
ever tell your spouse that you truly love, that they don't love you, that they don't care for you, that they don't want you, because you know what? You say that enough, and they'll be like, "Fine, if that's how you feel, then I'm out."
And we know the reason why you're saying it, people. We know. It's because you want to hear them say they love you. It's because you want to
Mhm.
hear them say those things. You want the opposite of what you're telling them. Just be upfront, be direct and be honest. Say,
Mhm,
I'm feeling really in my feelings right now. I'd really appreciate it if you told me you loved me a little bit more
mhm.
instead of you don't love me. Like, no, don't
And
manipulate in that manner.
right, but most of the time that people say that is when they're not getting their way,
Yes.
and we're not children. When we get told no, accept it, or if you disagree with it, don't say, "Well, you told me no because you don't love me, or you don't care for me, or you don't want me to succeed." No, 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 no. Ask them, "What is your reasoning for telling me no?" Communicate to why you told them no. Don't just say
Mhm.
no and walk away. If you ask me a question and I tell you no, and you say, "Why did you tell me no?" Don't just say, "Well, that's because the way I feel." But no, say, "No, because for the best interest of our family, the answer is
Yes.
no because of X, 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 X."
Yeah, a
Or
logical reason.
right, give a logical reason. But if when you are told no, you act like a 2-year-old throwing yourself on the floor, throwing a tantrum, saying that the reason you're told no is because you're not loved or cared for or any of that, don't expect to be treated like an adult when you're told no. And
Yeah,
that's sort of
and don't
cool and
expect pos and don't expect a positive outcome. That's not what you're gonna receive.
exactly, exactly. And one thing that I have learned is to mirror people. And when
Mhm,
you mirror people and how they treat you and how they react to you, when you mirror them, they're like, "Oh crap, is that how I really said that to them? Is that how I really reacted to that?" And then that puts a check and balance in their life
mhm,
about, "Hey, I shouldn't be such a jerk when I say no," or "Hey, I shouldn't be such a jerk in giving my explanation. I just need to give my explanation." Um, and these are things that if you've not been through a divorce yet, these are things that you can change in your marriage today that can keep you from the divorce court. I will tell anybody, I would not wish divorce on my worst enemy. It is
mm-mm,
painful, it is humiliating, it is disgusting, it
and
is
it's more
very cruel.
harmful it's more
Yes,
harmful when kids are involved.
absolutely,
It sucks.
absolutely.
Like, there's no other way to say it. It sucks when kids are involved.
Yes, yes. One of the biggest mistakes that I made in my divorce was I was so angry and so frustrated that I said, "You know what? Pack all your crap up and move to Georgia where you came from." I
Mm,
wish to God a million times that I wouldn't have done that because now my little boy lives 6 hours away from me. It ain't like I can just go across town to see him. It isn't like I can just, yeah, me and him FaceTime multiple times a week. Don't get me wrong. But
mhm,
that has nothing, that has no, what's the right word? Comparison to being
mhm.
able to see him and to be able to
Absolutely.
love on him and to be able to be a part of his life each and every day.
Yeah. Do you get to have them on, like, during the summer or
Yes.
yeah?
He spent a whole week up here with me for his birthday, and for Father's Day. And he will let's see, he goes back to school in August, or he'll go to school in August. I'll actually go down for his first day of school in August. But yeah, they're like, I have him the week of Christmas this year. Next year I'll have him for the week of Thanksgiving. So yeah, I can get him as long as I give a 30-day notice and it's not within the school year. I can get him anytime I want him. Um,
Good.
so it's a good thing. Um, he's at a
I'd
place
love to
right now.
have I'd love to have an actual episode with you on co-parenting. I think that that would be a really good one for some
Okay.
people. I don't know if you'd be open to it. I'm not gonna put you on the spot. Just think on it and let me know.
No,
Because
I'm very open to it. I have no
okay.
problem talking about co-parenting. I can actually take you through some. I actually can take you down a path of where I didn't talk to my child for almost a year due
Yeah.
to lack of co-parenting, and they moved to
Mhm.
another. I don't want to get too deep into it, but they moved to another state, got into a lot of stuff. They finally came back, and when they came back, I got to see my child. It was a
Yeah.
year exactly when I got to see my child. So yeah, I
Yeah.
would love to do that.
Cool. We'll table that and then get back into divorce. Sorry to my viewers. I know we got off topic, but I think that it was just led that way, so it happens. Let's see. I have other questions for you. Um, I think you kind of covered that. I had a question about what specific lessons from your first marriage
Mm.
shaped the kind of spouse you strive to be now.
Yeah,
Um,
communication. I mean, that's
yeah, communication.
that's communication. Um, Giving clear explanations. Don't be as opinionated. Make sure the other party fully understands why you said no or why you said yes or why you made the decision that you made. Before making a decision, talk to your spouse, make sure they're on board with you in that
Hmm.
decision. If not, sit down and learn and ask them questions so that they can communicate with you. Have an open mind. That's one of the problems that we have. To we go to the table and we go there to bargain what we want or to lay out a plan of what we want. We go with a closed mind. Go with an
Hmm.
open mind. Be willing to compromise. It ain't got to be 100% my way. It ain't got to be 100% your way. But let's find the middle ground and say, okay, since it ain't going to be all my way, it ain't going to be all your way. Let's find the middle ground and we can make this work. Um, so those are things that shape me into the person that I am be today. I do try my best to spend a lot more time with my wife and with my stepkids and with the baby on the way. I don't have a problem now stepping back saying, you know what, I got a family at home. I'm, I'm doing all I can do. I don't have that problem anymore. Um,
Good.
I want to be the I want to be the dad that's always there. I want to be the stepdad that's always there. And my stepdaughters know there are times that I cannot physically be there. They understand that. But I try to be there 99% of the time.
Good. Um, how has God worked through your story to bring beauty from brokenness, even if it didn't look like you imagined?
3 different areas that I've been able to work in that God's turned the beauty into brokenness. I relate my story to what the devil meant for evil, God meant for
Hmm.
good. That's what Joseph said.
Yes.
And everybody thought that I would tap out through this divorce.
Sounds like it. I mean, you had people calling you, and that's so crazy to me, like, honestly. But go ahead.
Um, so I preached a lot of revival meetings. I preached with a lot of different preachers. I did a lot of different things. Today, 95% of the preachers that I preach for, talk to, associated with, has nothing to do with me. Through that, God has showed me who my true friends are.
Yes.
Um,
That's a blessing.
it is. That is a big blessing. So that's the first step. Secondly, I would say it has made me as I said earlier in the podcast, it's made me a better pastor.
Hmm.
It humbled me. It brought me down to a place that I had to rebuild, and I've done that with the grace of God. Also, I would say that it's opened up a lot of opportunities for me to come on podcast and share my story. I think this is the
Mm.
3rd or 4th podcast that I've been on that I've been able to share my story to let other people know that they're not going through it alone. To let other people know that, you've got this. Yeah, you're down right now. Yeah, it hurts. Yeah, it sucks, but you can rebuild. Also, I've seen my church family circle around me. It has built
Mm.
unity around the church. And the church itself, since some dead weight has come out of it, has grown.
Hmm.
And we have now they have a pastor's wife who's involved, a pastor's wife who loves, a pastor's wife who cares, a pastor's wife who supports. It's made the church stronger.
Yeah.
So in my personal life, in my pastoring life, In my podcast life, in all of these areas, God has taken what was broken and he's rebuilt it for me.
Mhm.
And I'm grateful for that.
And he's using it for good because other people are going through this and you get to share firsthand your own experience and they can
Yes.
resonate with that.
Yes. And when someone looks at me and says, "Hey, I'm going through a divorce," you can read through the hurt that they're trying to hide.
Mhm.
When
Yeah.
someone when I work in a lot of different people's homes, places that if I went in and said I'm a pastor, I never could get into. When I go in there and somebody sits down and says, "You know what? I just came through a divorce." And I said, "I've already been there." "You have?" And it opens up all of these questions. How did you handle this? How would you handle that? How would you do this? How would you do that? It is it's made me a more understanding Christian, a more understanding person.
Yeah.
That divorce I, that divorce is not an evil. How can I want to be careful with how I say this. I don't encourage divorce, but divorce is not an evil thing. It can be a good thing depending on your situation.
Mhm. Yeah, I
Now, if
agree.
I'm now it shouldn't be a thing, "Oh, I fell in love with this lady, so I'm gonna leave my wife for this lady." That ain't what divorce is
Absolutely
meant
not.
for.
No, no.
If you do that, I hope divorce screws you over more than one way. So, but
Yeah.
on the other but on the other hand, um, you know, I've learned to ask, what are your circumstances of divorce? Why? Why did you go through it? Why did you choose to go through it? That's what I would ask them. Um, and that gives me a better understanding of where they're at spiritually, physically, mentally. Um, it's rebuilt me spiritually. It's rebuilt me physically. Um, I believe there's not much more hurt that I could face that would hurt more than a divorce.
Mhm.
Um, physically, mentally, or spiritually. Um, and you also spiritually, you will learn to not let criticism affect you. Because when you are going through a divorce, there's going to be a lot said about you from the other party. And some of it may be true, 95% of it will be false. Do not respond to it. Period.
Don't.
Let it go. Yeah, I don't care how false it is. I don't care how true it is. Do not respond. If it's false and you respond, you look guilty. Some
Mhm.
people say, "Well, I look guilty if I don't respond." No, you don't. Because God will vindicate you over and over and over again. I can tell you firsthand, He will vindicate you over again.
Mhm. Yeah, just show in your life who you are and let your works be your testimony to who you are. You don't need to tell people, "I didn't do that, I'm a good person." Um, Usually the person that's talking a lot in the marriage or the divorce is usually the person that is the most dramatic, most emotional, and they twist some stories to play the victim.
Mhm,
But the
mhm.
person that usually stays the quietest, they're probably the one that's taking the higher ground.
Yep, and there's a reason they're taking the higher ground.
And there's a reason. Yeah. Yeah. Um, what would you say, you kind of spoke on this, but what in particular would you say to someone, like you're speaking to our listeners who feel like they've failed because of divorce? What hope can you offer?
Divorce is final, but it is not your final destination.
I like that.
You can recover from divorce. Um, my divorce almost bankrupted me
Mhm.
financially.
Same.
Uh, it almost it about took me out spiritually, and it was tough on me mentally. Through the divorce, it was not my final destination, At the end of the day, take what has happened in this divorce. Do not let it be a stumbling block to keep you from moving forward, but take each part of the divorce and make it a stepping stone to move in the right direction.
Yes, that's important. Make it where you feel like you've been knocked down. Now come back better.
That is
See where
correct.
you were and rebuild. This is your time. This is your moment that you get to focus on you and how you want your life to be, and you get the chance to rebuild it.
Don't be careful. Here's something else I will tell you. Be careful who you trust in getting your information from. Be careful in who you vent to, because not
Yes.
every person through the divorce that you vent to is your friend. Some of them are your frenemy. They're acting like you're your friend, and they're taking the information that you're sharing with them back to the enemy to destroy you. Choose who you share your information with wisely. Thirdly, build a strong relationship with God. When you don't know who to trust, when you don't know who to talk to, take it to God in
Yes.
prayer. And I growing up in church, I used to hear people say, just pray about it, just pray about it, just pray about it. And I know you can't, I know you are supposed to pray about everything. And there's sometimes that you need other people to talk to. I totally understand that. But in times of uncertainty, take it to God and say, God, put the right person in my path that I can talk to, that I can open up to, that I can vent to, that I know without a shadow of a doubt is not going to take it back to the enemy.
And a lot of listeners might think that prayer has to be this certain way you speak to God. So they feel like you need to be eloquent, you need to say the right things. God knows your heart, period, point blank.
Mhm.
So all you're doing in that manner of speaking to God, it's not like he doesn't already know. You are allowing yourself to have a relationship that allows you to get things off your chest,
Mhm.
not keep them inside, because God still
Mhm.
knows when they're inside. He knows what it is. But to say it out loud is healing for you. So when you speak to God, let's say your ex spouse did something, you can say, God, they did this, that, and the other. And I'm so upset about it. I don't know what to do. And just vent to God. It doesn't need to be this eloquent prayer.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100% on that. And don't try to, and don't go to God making it all about your ex.
Yeah.
Go to God and say, God, help me. Help
Hmm.
me to be the better person. God, help me to navigate this path.
Hmm.
Um, because at the end of the day, God can only help those who want his help.
Yes. Yeah.
Something else, this will go outside the walls of the church, but find a good therapist.
Oh, absolutely. I'm 100% on board with that. Find a good therapist
And make sure the therapist isn't somebody inside of your church who could use this against you later on down the road. Find
because
somebody
we're
that you
human.
exactly. Make sure it's somebody that you can trust. Make sure they have an NDA in place. They can't talk about nothing that you go in there with, and take it to them and say, God, or take your problems to them and be able to vent to them about it.
Yeah.
Um, my therapist was my best friend. Me and my best friend grew up together, and me and him has been through a lot together. And I was able to use him as a vent, and I
Is
knew
he an
he
actual
wasn't anywhere.
therapist?
No,
Oh, okay. Okay.
no, he's far from it. Trust me.
Okay. But a good person to confide in. So that's
Yes,
that's good.
yes,
That's good.
it was. But yeah, find a good therapist, um, and make sure that you confide in them. And when you're down and out, be sure to reach out to them and let them know where you're standing. Um, you know, so that there's a clear communication with them. Don't try to hide nothing from them, is one of the
Hmm.
keys of advice that I would give. Ground yourself in the word of God, ground
Yes.
yourself around the people of God. Um, I know church online is very popular, but during the dark times of your life, don't be afraid to go to church on Sunday morning. Go. Get up, make yourself go. Sit on the pew. You know why? Because, yeah, it feels good to sit at home and watch church. I understand that. But you may not feel the strength and the prayers of God's people as strong as you do when you sit amongst God's people and
Mhm.
communicate with them.
Mhm.
And, you know, and when you have that type of relationship with the church and with the people of God and with God, God will help you as much as he can, as much as you will allow him to.
Yeah.
That would be my advice for anybody going through divorce. Something else, I'll give you another piece of advice that I didn't, that I wish I would have taken. Get up, make sure you have a good lawyer.
Mhm.
Don't try to represent yourself in a divorce. You'll get screwed over. Pardon my language, but you will. You'll
You
absolutely
will.
get screwed over
Yeah.
if you don't. Um, you know, and don't and again, as we've already said, don't play victim. Even if it's your fault. Man up, woman up. I screwed up. This is how I screwed up. This is what my screw up cost me. So I own what I've done and move
That's
on
what I
with
was
it.
gonna bring up. That's what I was gonna bring up. When you talked about the therapist, I wanna really, put out there that the person, whether it's a licensed therapist or a friend like yours was,
Mhm.
it needs to be someone that is not going to be your cheerleader, and what I
Mhm.
mean by that, someone that's going to call you on your bull and see through your victimization and your villainization and
Mhm.
help you break down exactly what you can learn from the situation and take responsibility for your actions, because otherwise you will harbor bad feelings towards your ex. And remember, God always called us to love and forgive.
Mhm. Mhm.
So to
And it,
move on truly, you need to be very realistic in your views on what occurred.
yes, and Jesus said that if we didn't forgive our neighbor of his trespasses, neither would our heavenly Father forgive us of our trespasses. And that's
Yes.
where I was going to end, is to forgive those who have wronged you. Forgive those even when they've not apologized. There's a lot of
Yes.
people who have done me wrong that has never came back to me not one time and said, "I'm sorry," but I can see them out today in Walmart, or I can see
Mhm.
them out today at a party and say, "Hey guys, how are y'all?" Never have a guilty conscience. They may have told their head down, but by God, I'm not holding my head down because I've forgiven them, I've loved them, I've cared for them,
Yes.
and I moved on. And just because I forgive you does not mean that I have to be your best friend.
Mm-mm. And it
I can
doesn't mean you
forgive
forget.
exactly. I can forgive you, but that doesn't mean that we're going to go out and party later tonight either. I
Yeah,
can
my
forgive you and love you at a distance.
yes, my co-host Andrea unfortunately couldn't be on with us. She's very busy, so when she hops on, it's a big blessing, and I'm excited. But she couldn't make it today. But she talks about an analogy of forgiveness. It's like holding a hot coal,
Mhm,
expecting the person you're upset with to hurt.
mhm.
That's not going to happen. You're hurting yourself.
Exactly, exactly. Because unforgiveness turns into bitterness, bitterness turns into malice, malice turns into pride, and pride turns into hate. And at
Yes,
the end of the day, not one of those things that I just mentioned is part of the fruit of the Spirit.
none of them. That's fantastic. Um,
So,
what prayer or scripture anchored you when everything felt uncertain? Do you have a particular one that we could lean toward?
my life scripture is Philippians 1:21 that says, "For me to live is Christ and to die is gain." And you say, how does that make sense in what we just talked about? Because everything that I live, every day that I live, everything that I face, Christ is with me. Christ made a promise to us in the book of Hebrews that he would never leave us nor forsake
Nor
us,
forsake us.
that
Yep.
he would walk with us through everything that we face. And when I'm living, I'm not living for my ex. I'm not living for my current wife. I'm not living for anybody else, but I'm living for Christ. And when I die, I gain being in the presence of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what verse that I leaned on throughout my entire divorce area was that God's got me either way. If I live, I'm going to win. If I die, I'm going to win. But one of the biggest things that got me through this, and I know we got to wrap up, was one
Mm-hmm.
day I was really struggling. It was on a Wednesday, and I was getting ready to go to church, and I was really struggling. I had gotten off work, I had went home to take a shower, and I was struggling. Like I was crying, I was beside myself, I was miserable. And I had the radio on, and coming through the radio was Bethel's music song, "The Goodness of God." And
Mm-hmm.
when it got to that part, when I walked through the fire, God's been right there beside of me. And man, that song resonated with me.
Mm-hmm.
And for 3 or 4 months, I would play that song every morning when I got up to remind me about how good God has been to me. And it was a motivation that no matter where I'm at in life, no matter what I'm going through, I'm still living in the goodness of God.
I love it. I love it. Last question. If you could go back and tell yourself one thing in the middle of that painful season, what would it be?
Don't listen to the haters.
Yeah. Yours, yours in particular, I would say that's a good one.
Um, don't listen to the haters. Don't worry about what other people think. Do everything that you're doing for the glory of God and keep
Period.
moving.
Yeah.
That's exactly
Period.
what I would tell myself.
Good. I like it. So we'll wrap up here. If you want to stay on right after I close out.
Yeah.
Um, but I really appreciate everyone that streamed this morning and everyone that will be listening to this when it airs. And if you have any questions or want to reach out to Pastor Jonathan Smith, you can reach out to him on, what was your website again?
JustTheBibleWillDo.com.
JustTheBibleWillDo.com. And then if you are new to us, I have a Bound by Grace podcast group on Facebook. Please become a part of it. We post things on there. You can ask questions on there. You can be anonymous. That would be fantastic for us to just engage. And we're really just trying to be relational with God and center our marriages and relationships in Christ. So we explore all avenues on how to do that and how to overcome certain things. But I really appreciate everyone and hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. Bye.